Okay, so the subject of Sangha has come up a number of times in the last couple of weeks. And we've had some good talks about it, including last night's discussion on the book club. We had a discussion of, again, of the what is the meaning of a Sangha. So I wanted to give you my ideas or what I think about Sangha, having time to think about it. Okay, so suppose you decide to cook a very delicious dish of food, such as a stew of many vegetables and savory spices. So there'd be carrots, onions, ginger, celery, potatoes, kale, parsnips, peas, tomatoes, and oregano and garlic and basil leaves, as well as fenugreek, oil, broth, or anything else that occurs to you while you're making it. You might think you could just peel and cut everything the same and pile it all at once to save time. And it probably would be good enough, but it might not be good enough for a real taste. So the vegetables would not rise to the occasion because the best of them would not be encouraged by treating them all in the same way, by ignoring their differences. Some things need to go into the pot first and browned in order to tease out the flavor. Some things need to be cooked so thoroughly that they would be put in the pot sooner to make sure their soft, full flavor would not be wasted on tough chewing. Some spices need to be put in first and heated in oil before putting in the beginning vegetables. Some very tender pieces would need to go in last to make sure that their light, elegant flavor doesn't get lost. So broth and spices finish up everything, and then the slow cooking begins to bring it all together as one delicious, full-bodied flavor. It takes a lot of work to bring everything together in a stew. Every single piece of it requires effort. Nothing is more special in a stew than another. No matter how good the appearance, no matter how good the talents, no matter how good everything is with speech and body and mind. Different treatments are based on the need of each vegetable or herb to release the flavor and the fragrance. Every part of the stew is equally important for the full taste. The orange carrots, the red tomatoes, the fragrant, strong, or piquant spices, all will bring something important to the final dish. Finally, it can become a single taste of many colors and textures. And best of all, it is a nourishment for the body, as well as a satisfying meeting for the senses. To do it all at once without having to consider what's lost by ignoring the full-bodied flavors, the light and fine flavors, the powerful and gentle feelings, produces a mediocre taste of nothing special. Because everything but a few pieces doesn't really receive what they actually need. To make a really good stew, everything has to receive its just due, as well as the cook's most special effort. The cook is Buddha, of course, but we can obstruct the work by not putting our best effort into it. In a Sangha, we share a common practice, but that's the only thing we share besides being human with a Buddha nature core. In the Sangha, we come together for the convenience of practice, and our comfort preference at the beginning is to lean on each other for support and to share experiences of practice, problems, and joys in talking. We fully expect everyone to agree on politics, social needs, sexual standards, and the way of living. We expect to be one community by being like-minded, like-thinking, like-feeling, or like-choice-making people. We expect to agree on everything. But this is what creates a mediocre stew. Buddha would not be the cook of this stew. We think this is what harmony means. We think cooking everything into the same texture and substance and looks is harmony. But harmony is a result of a much more flexible and creative means to reconcile differences and the diversity of people in a peaceful way. In a true harmony, all of the individual colors would still remain present and visible. The differences of being would still be allowed to exist. The creativity of everyone would flourish in their own personal creative language. Buddha nature can then flourish throughout the Sangha. When we enter a Sangha, we look for likeness or sameness. But what we find instead is a bunch of baby Buddha natured people who have very little in common except the need to arise early in order to meditate if they're in a monastery. In a lay group, their practice is a whole other color. In a monastery, we're all very different, but there isn't time to discuss differences or likenesses because we're always following a schedule under the close eye of a teacher or teachers. A lay group, however, lives separately and arranges their lifestyles to suit themselves. They're all drawn to practice with a teacher in a community, driven by personal and social suffering of everyday life activities. And they might expect a Sangha to reflect their outlook and desires. They fully expect to be nurtured as they expect to be nurtured. And they fully expect the teacher and everyone else to ignore the existence of samsara and such a thing as self. They find to their surprise that the always present teacher is Buddha, whatever it looks like. Buddha and does not move to whims, urges, or the needs of samsara. The teacher, Buddha, looks past all activity of ego or limited self, knowing that these are transient, and waits for the authentic person to show up and learn how to unfold their limited self nature in real time. In the meantime, everyone meditates together and learns about bowing, chanting, and peaceful relationships. Most of the time, that's not understood as being a real practice, but it finally develops into one. If it's a living Sangha of the three treasures, everyone who comes will be welcome. There's no judgment of a person's politics, abilities, character, personal choices, or their own chosen ways to live. There's no effort to make people completely like-minded, like-feeling about issues of the world. Politically in agreement, they are not expected to be. Gender differences or religious differences are totally tolerated. There's no desire or effort to choose between deserving or undeserving people. Differences and diversity are encouraged and very desirable in a Sangha. Personal whims and arguments are discouraged, and harmony is slowly developed throughout the Sangha through the efforts of discipline by everyone. The wider the range of differences in a Sangha, the greater the innate talent and sense of purpose will be. Creativity can flourish in such a group and be a source of inspiration for everyone. The Sangha then can be a living Sangha that will change, grow, and mature. We come here expecting to be upheld by the Sangha, but it's we who uphold the Sangha. The Sangha is not a place, a community, or an abstraction. We are the Sangha, each individual, each heart touching one another, each body and mind practicing wholeheartedly, not following something abstract called Buddhism, but each a core of Buddha nature that disciplines its own small mind and unconscious, unkind speech and unruly activity of body. We endure, we are patient, we are devoted in practice, not to an abstraction called practice, but to waking up, to dropping off body and mind. We want to walk freely in this reality, not booby-trapped by unconscious anger, desire, and ignorance. And so we continue, allowing others to be who they are, letting go of hurt, letting go of anything that separates us so that we can't function as one, welcoming all, nourishing young Buddha nature, protecting our core, protecting the harmony of the Sangha, protecting its living quality by never forgetting the power of one individual, nor the strength of an undivided one. Not looking to enshrine our basest whims and urges, and not trying to make a shrine of practice, but keeping it practical, living, simple, and flexible by including everyone. Thank you. That's it. I hope you have questions about Sangha because we've had a lot this week.
I also want to change this over to, I got the big screen rather than the small screen. Okay, there we go. There you go. That big. And who is AC?
Over here at the end, we had the first one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, John?
So as Buddhists, the rules that we govern ourselves by, not to take that which is not given, right speak, all these, these were developed, weren't they, in order to have monks and those living amongst themselves be able to live in a better harmony, yes? Or were
Yes.
that's why they were originally created, yeah? So it would seem that in the lay world that we practice in, that some of them are a little less come into play a little less often than they would if we were amongst others. And I think that the biggest one that we deal with as lay people is right speech. I think that accepting of others and their views isn't always an easy thing to do in our heads. And oftentimes what is in our heads comes out our mouths, which isn't always great. And this harkens me back to another talk that you gave, Jane, regarding speech, and is something I've thought about a lot since you gave it. And I heard another, I was listening to a podcast and heard another person speak about speech, and he was very funny. He said, I hate to tell you, he said, but if you really, really are following right speech, he said, most of us aren't talking that much. he said, think about it. He said, think about the things that you really say during the day. He said, the things that are just said for no reason, the things that are said from a bad place, the things that are gossip, the things that are idle, he said, you're almost never going to speak. He said, and that's not a bad thing. And sometimes I think that in a Sangha and in all situations, as social creatures that live amongst each other, we feel this need, like you've talked about, Jane, to speak to each other and to tell our, to somehow the feeling that connects us. And sometimes I feel like it's one of the hardest things I know for me to get through, and I think a lot of people to get through, is just, getting past that need to say something. So yeah. I'm going to stop speaking.
That's a very good point, John, because speech is one of those body, speech, and mind practices. And the body you're training by sitting on the cushion. Your speech, you have to train by thinking about what you're saying. And that's the most important thing, is that the majority of speech we do is we're not aware of even. So we did a thing once in making Roxus where we put a jar in the middle, and every time we said something unkind, we put like a penny or something in it. And it's surprising how often you have the urge to put something in the jar because you know what you said was like worthless. So if we did that as a full-time practice every day, I think we'd have a lot of money in a jar, but we would probably end up not speaking most of the time. And speech is fine, speech for real communication is good, but most of the time our speech is camouflage. And so, as long as we're still camouflaging ourselves and camouflaging who we think we are, then we're missing something very important. And the reason to stop speaking isn't just to be, waste time, but to stop camouflaging who we are and just leave it stand out in the open and be completely vulnerable in the feeling of it. So that's the hard part. The reason we avoid that is because we do feel incredibly vulnerable when we don't have something between us like speech. And that's one of the ways. So there are three things we discipline very strongly in a Sangha, or have to. It takes like a long time to do it, but it's especially hard in a lay Sangha because there's no restriction of the walls of a monastery or the presence, ever-present teacher, even though we actually all have an ever-present teacher in our lives, every one of us. Every single person has that ever-present teacher, and so fooling ourselves is a waste of time. And the teacher already knows our innermost being. So why do we keep trying to disguise it? We should ask that of ourselves all the time. So that was a good point, John. Thank you. And Dan, what do you have? Are you there?
I'm here. So bravo on the talk. That's, first of all, it was a great follow-up to last night. My question is, you had a phrase that was where you referred to the convenience of practice. What is the convenience of practice?
I think just having a place to sit with everyone is a convenience. And just making a place where everybody can come and they know the one thing they can do here is sit. And if you're at home, you can't always be sure you can sit because of activities and things that happen around you. So it's just a convenience, a real convenience to have a place where you actually, no matter what you do, the main thing you do in that one place is to sit. And that is a real convenience. When Peter and I came back from Japan, we didn't have a community at that point to sit with, and we would go up to San Francisco sometimes, but most of the time we didn't. So we set aside a place in our room that was only for meditation, but still you have the intrusion of people or telephone or something, the doorbell, whatever. And so when it started being a place where people would come and join us for sitting, it took on a completely different feeling in the house, where this was the one place we knew when we started sitting, everybody who came would be sitting also. And so it was a true convenience of having a place to sit. So that's what I meant by it. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
Thank you.
Okay. Sandy. You can step in anytime.
When John was talking about speech, how it slips out. When we talked about body, speech, and mind, when you gave that talk, I thought about it and I realized what I needed to focus on was not so much what I was saying, but I really needed to focus on how to listen, and to listen to people quietly, not interject, and not try to solve their problems verbally, because it wouldn't work. So that in itself, not that it's cut down how much I speak, but I am more aware of that than ever before. And there are days when I have spoken a lot less, and they're much more peaceful.
Do you ever find, Sandy, that your mind stops racing?
Yes, when I sit quietly, yes, it does. Of course, that is until I actually sit to meditate. And then it starts off like a greyhound at the beginning line, you know. Um, but it is true. And the more I concentrate on listening to what's around me, even if I'm sitting in silence and I hear sounds, the dog walking, Howard getting up, those types of things, I find that my mind is much more quiet, and I don't have to have the judgments, the thoughts that go when I would hear people talk before or hear movement or whatever. A picture would come in my mind. You know, it's like, oh, that's Howard going down the hall, or that's Winston coming into the living room. You know, and those are like little movies all the time. That's the way it used to be, and it's like you're out of touch when that's happening. So to me, by concentrating on listening rather than concentrating on speaking or not speaking, uh, it just became, it seemed to be more natural uh, of the way to be at those times.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome.
One second. Let me get Chris here.
Okay.
Chris, of course. I think
So one is I'd love to get that recipe for stew because it sounds delicious. Another thing is my first summer at Tassajara, I did 2 days of silence or functional speech only. And that was really good for me to try because I talk impulsively and often at great length. And it like, it's like a self-generating like energy field that it's easy to get carried away with. And so the second day was a big struggle, but when I was able to follow through on that intention, oh, it was such a relief. I felt unburdened by this like the impulse because I was just ignoring it, and then it kind of would go away. But so many times during a conversation I was sitting next to or part of, someone would make a point, and then I'd want to follow up with my point. And it was like very important, and then someone else would make that same point. I'm just like, aha, good, someone else got it. That's nice. What got me talking about talking? I don't know. Someone said something about the silence, and just yeah. You know what? I think I should give it a try right now.
actually, Chris, I had a similar experience about that. When I was in Tassajara, Paul Disco would sit off to the side in the back and a little bit close. And when I was there in the first months or so, I was very shy, and especially in groups. And so I often wanted to ask questions of Suzuki Roshi at the end of his talks, but I was too shy to come out and say them. And eventually, almost every time, Paul or somebody in the back would ask the exact same question. And then I would hear the answer I wanted to hear. So it's probably a good point, that if you don't say all the things, you may hear them outside of you anyway. So anyway, thank you, Chris.
And just in
Ian.
general, oh sorry, oh just never mind.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But just in general, the extent to which in my daily life I focus on trying to listen and try to say less. I found it very enriching. I've learned a lot when I listen to like two friends of mine talk with each other about a topic and purposefully keep myself from, or like resist the impulse to like chime in with my own 2 cents.
That's a good point. If that was a practice, if we all did it, say for a half a day every day or an hour every day, 2 hours every day, we might be really surprised by what we learn during that time. Ian.
Well, in my reading a lot lately, the idea of skillful means keeps coming up. And, the idea that Buddha had a different prescription for every single person. And I deal with a lot of people during the day because I work at a hospital. So I'm trying to really take that lesson as far as like being in each moment and really talking to each person like they're the Buddha, because it's all one line, right? And the difference in the way that people respond is just night and day, compared to if you're grumpy and you let that kind of feed into the way that you treat other people, is just night and day if you just take a second, step back, and then go forward again.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. I've had people that now, in the hospital will say hi to me and I don't even remember their name. I feel that. But that just using, like you're saying, treating everybody like Sangha, everybody is part of the one, we're all human. And that's just a really important practice for me.
That's a good practice. I like that idea. In fact, it's what I was talking about for a Sangha is treating people individually rather than as group in any kind of thing, whether it's a genre or a group or a thinking, one
Right.
type of thinking. So it's treating everybody like that as an individual, so their pure color keeps coming through all the time. That's really nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good way to do it. June.
Is it possible for someone to speak too little?
No, I don't think so.
Like somebody who doesn't express maybe
Well,
what
that's
needs to be said?
Yeah, not expressing is different from speaking too little, I think. You're talking about a kind of suppression. Is that
Right.
right?
Could
Yeah,
be,
well,
yes.
yeah, suppression is not a healthy thing. Yeah, that's ignoring the true color, your true color or the person's true color. Yeah. But
So you find,
communicate.
but as humans, we communicate with words. And sometimes if you don't say anything, that could be a suppression, form of suppression.
It could
So,
be, but in most cases it probably isn't.
so if there was someone who tend to suppress by not speaking, if that was means of suppressing themselves, then could we say that for that person it's more beneficial to speak more?
No, I don't think it's ever a good practice to make yourself speak more. When you have something to say, you really will say it, no matter what. But if a person is suppressing some emotion and the other thing, that's a whole other thing. So just bringing the thing out into the public doesn't really help. It may help, it probably would help if you brought it into your awareness, but expressing it out with other people, not necessarily. So talking is a whole other thing, then we also communicate with touch or with anything, any of the senses is another means of communication with other people. We communicate with gestures, we communicate with looks. If you've ever been in a place where people don't talk, like a monastery, you learn body language a whole lot bigger than you normally would. You just pay attention to it and you see it going on, and it becomes real communication. So if you don't talk all the time, you become aware of that kind of communication, a physical communication. So
that's
I don't.
something that is something that I experience naturally with, for example, my horses. Like they don't understand human language, so I have to find a way to express and communicate with each other through body language and energy. So that comes naturally to me. But at the same time, with humans, I think, like you said, I have an idea in my head that I feel like I don't really need to express, so I tend to not say it. But sometimes I wonder if I'm suppressing it or I really do not have need to say it.
Well, let me just ask you, if you have it in your head and you don't express it, do you ever regret it afterwards? Or do you feel
I only regret it when I feel like um
You missed something?
yeah.
Hmm. Well, that's a try. That's just one of those things where you do the best you can in it, and you find out by trial and error whether it was needed or whether it was not needed. And then you just, I think it's just a case where you just express and find out if it was really needed, or don't express and feel if you have regret. And you just learn piece by piece like that. If anybody has any different idea about this, by the way, please speak up. Anyway, is that okay, June?
Yes, I mean, I think that a lot of times it's better for me. I mean, I feel like a lot of times I don't really want to speak, but then because of that, I kind of lose the opportunity to be seen. Like, for example, in a community like this, even like I'm actually forcing myself to speak today because I usually don't feel like it. And I think that sometimes me not wanting to speak is form of either suppression or some kind of being more insular or something. Like I just don't feel open. So sometimes that happens to me when I don't want to speak. That means I don't really want to open up. So for someone like me, maybe it would be actually beneficial to speak more. That was just my
Try it.
thought.
That makes you feel better. Try it. I mean, today you're speaking, and all the things you're bringing up are very nice, very good. Something we can all think about. So just try it and see if you prefer speaking up. As I said, when I first went to Tassajara, I was extremely shy in a group, and so I couldn't bring myself to ask the questions I'd liked. But eventually I got over that. But I felt that there's things I understood because I was quiet at that time that I didn't on my own by talking. And then I found that I ended up talking too much. So I think it's just a trial and error type of thing to find out what makes you feel right about it and what makes you feel like something was not quite right.
Yeah, I guess it feels like to me that there is some kind of art in speech where you have to kind of find that balance,
Yeah.
like either
Yes.
too much or speaking too less. Like you have to find balance between that. And
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mitch, it's good to see you.
I should unmute my microphone. When I was a kid, my best friend's father was a ham radio operator. And when he wanted to talk, he flipped a little toggle one way. And when he wanted to receive, he flipped the toggle the other way. And it was very discreet. Either he was sending or receiving. And that always stuck with me. And I don't know why. And then I realized that for me, the everything impinges on me. Light enters my eye from the outside, sound comes into my ears, things come into my mouth that I taste, smells come into my nose, things outside touch me. And this is like the receiving mode. And it really sort of kind of helped me, because I'm a very glib person. I like to talk and I like to, interject, and I'm sort of kind of a rude person in that way. So that really helped me realize that I just have to let the world impinge on me. I don't have to send out. I just sort of kind of have to receive. And I was at Great Vow with Chosen Bay Roshi, and she said, the Zendo is surrounded by grass and very nice lawns, and they usually open the windows. And she said, when you're sitting zazen, listen to the grass grow. And that really stuck with me. And I think that's the same kind of thing. Sometimes you just have to receive.
That's a good point, Mitch. That's a very good point. And June, just to bring up one thing, There are no rules whatsoever about talking or not talking. It's just everybody finds out what their real color or their real desire, and not just the feeling of what they should do, but what they actually want to do is only trial and error. That's the only way you can figure it out. Because there's no
Yeah.
real rules. Yeah.
Yes, and that's what I really love about our practice. And the more I practice, I just kind of noticed myself not wanting to speak. But then a lot of times I don't really miss speaking. And sometimes I kind of get in my head and think about whether this is a good thing or not. So I just wanted to kind of,
It's a good way. That's good. Don't stop doing that. Keep assessing and studying yourself. That's what it is. You're not always happy with what you find, or you may be happy with what you find. But don't stop. Was it you, Sandy, or Chris? Was it Sandy? What is it?
Yeah, Sandy.
Sandy?
June, your talk, you're talking with Jane, brought up a memory. When I was younger, I used to ride horses a lot and loved being around them. And I always felt, connected to the horse that I was riding, especially if I was continuing to ride him all the time. And I live very close to a place where they do therapy on horses. And I forgot the name of it, but that place recently had a show based on what they do on television. And they were showing how the horses are, you wouldn't normally think it, but the horses are so attuned to us that they can read us and they know what we need. If we need affection, if we're scared and we need to be able to overcome our fears, they can sense what we need. And also that they almost communicate back and forth. And a lot of it is with touch, where, just grooming the horse or touching the horse, looking into its eyes, its face. There is a cross communication, and it's not verbal. It's just something we can do. We can do it with others, with people. We can do it with all kinds of animals, trees, all types of things in our environment. And it's a silent thing. So, and that's a good thing, that silence, because it allows us to be able to communicate like that. So it's just one thing I actually like about silence is how well it opens you to communication.
That's what we try to do with sesshin, or with an all-day sitting, is to bring that to people's awareness that, silence is still communication. And I would say that about animals. I would say cats, dogs, any animal, birds, whatever, are also communicating all the time like that without words. If we just open.
That's true. My husband says I talk to the squirrels.
Chris.
Two things, and I'll try and keep it brief because we're kind of going on, which is I love the irony in that we're talking about when, not talking can be a good thing, and I've been talking a lot more than normal. Anyways, so but Jane, you sort of invited anyone to speak up if you felt like you had different ideas about you were saying, and if this is a bad summary, I'm sorry, but basically the sense that it's always a good thing to talk less. Was that it? Ish.
That would be my opinion. Yes.
Okay, so I did want to share a different idea, and part of it is sort of inspired by East Bay Meditation Center's agreements for multicultural communication. One of the agreements is step up, step back, And so someone like me who talks a lot should step back in a conversation, in a community conversation, and someone who usually stays quiet and stays withdrawn should step up a little bit. And I think the goal there is to introduce a multitude of perspectives and make sure that certain people aren't dominating the conversation and that everyone gets a chance to be heard. And or like if someone's in a relationship with another person or a community and if they have needs that are not being addressed or they're being neglected, they should speak up. Or to intervene in a violent or exploitative situation. I think that would be a good place to. But John and Dan were both making the point that we're trying to practice right speech, and sometimes the right speech is silence, and sometimes right speech is some kind of speech. And I also wanted to read what Arvin posted in the chat, just because it's been a while since I've heard from him. So he types, "If I can sit in silence with someone I find odious, why can't I work with them in the garden or picking up trash on the road or whatever? And in doing so, create a deeper engagement, even politically. Why do we avoid this? Why do I feel here that it often feels like accepting diversity means rejecting collective purpose?" I wanted to make sure that his contribution had a chance to be heard. And now I will shut up.
Okay, that's actually, thank you, Arvin. I will.
For now.
I would like to say something to that, address that anyway. I think there is a difference in a social community, and there is a difference in a meditation community. In a meditation community, we have all the diversity because we need the differences to make things work. But we also are not meditating mainly on our diversity, even though we are diverse, and diversity is welcomed and wanted. But we're not meditating on that. We're meditating on our common Buddha nature. And so we're encouraging Buddha nature to step forward. We're encouraging the commonness of all of us together being one, and yet having an individual color and difference and talent and desire of the world. We're not trying to create political purpose or anything else. We're trying to work together to bring this major part of our lives out into the open, where we usually don't have it, where we usually have it sabotaged by our small self or hidden by our small self. And we're encouraging all of us to sit there and allow this part of us to come out freely. And there's no time for wasting talk on politics, issues, or anything else, because the major thing we're doing here is encouraging everyone's Buddha nature to show itself without fear, without any feeling of rejection of anything, no matter how different we all are, because we're putting that differences on the surface, but underneath is what we're really working with, whatever it may appear. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Arvin? From Matt to everyone.
As
Thanks,
one of the non-speakers
go on.
on this, I'm called upon to speak. I don't particularly. So let me say to everybody, thank you very much. And is there anybody else?
Wait, why did you say something about everything? All of this. I know you're interested in Sangha.
I think that, well, I mentioned it recently, but for me, Sangha is family, and it's just what it is. You know, we don't. I've also said this also recently, but anyway, we don't choose our family, and in a way we do choose our Sangha, but we don't choose the Sangha members. But we're here together, and because of that, we naturally support each other. Just like the cats outside support me, a lot of stray cats now, and they all support each other. Without talking, of course.
And would anyone of you like a kitten?
No, we can't catch it anyway.
One of them has just had kittens. I haven't even seen them yet. A black cat.
Oh,
It's
no.
really pretty.
Oh, no.
And then there's a little striped kitty that's about 4 months old. That's really cute, and I can't get anywhere near it. If anybody would like to come and call a kitty,
Yeah.
I
There's
call her Tulip.
there's when you go on here. Let me go back past the cat talk here.
Sorry.
And before I forget what I wanted to say. And that is, that kind of that quote of Kennedy. One quote Kennedy is, there was probably someone else wrote, but anyway, in his inauguration speech, he said, don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that's true for Sangha also.
Yeah.
So there's not, there's not something to get from being a family. You are a family, and we are a family. And of course, some people are bound. What binds us together is, of course, our desire for understanding of what's really going on in our world and the world.
And in us.
And we support each other by each of us doing it in our own way. And the most important thing, that's always brought up and talks about a Sangha, is the most important thing for Sangha is harmony. Harmony is the qualification, is the major quality. And therefore, it's very important to maintain that harmony. We don't have to do anything about it, but we have to be aware of if we ourselves, and I can't think of any case of this happening, by the way, make for disharmony in the Sangha.
Yeah.
Harmony is most important for a family. And when we're like that, we're open, and we're more loving, and we're more compassionate. So think about, or I think about myself, what can you guys give us at all? I think about, without thinking about it, and not as a leader of it, but just as a person in it, is what I can do for you. And we should all think about what I can do, not for the Sangha, but what I can do for the individual members who are also members of the Sangha. We came together without being a family, but here we are as a family, and we take care of each other. And that's part of our practice, because of course, the most important thing for us is developing compassion. Wisdom and compassion. Of course, they go together, but particularly in dealing with others with compassion. Everything that you say in a Sangha, you don't have to be confined, by the way, but it sounds that way. But basically, when you speak to a Sangha, your main thing, of course, is the harmony, but also the compassion. So we can develop compassion with each other by training with each other.
I put an addenda on that.
Yes.
I think one of the things is that if you wonder how you can be a family when you're all so different, I think what we're all saying here is that underneath the Buddha nature, we're all family. On the surface, we think we're all different, but that's a confusion, and that's what we mean by ignorance. Not paying attention to the real person, not paying attention to the real situation. And so we get caught up in superficial problems and fighting and talking and things that have nothing to do with anything. And the real problem is working together as a single unit, not forgetting our differences, but working together because our Buddha nature is all present, and we want to bring that to the surface. That's where we are common in our connection, especially. Ian.
Would you say that the relationships we have in the Sangha are a bit of a microcosm for the macrocosm of dealing with the larger population?
I would, definitely.
Yeah.
Ian just asked, would you say that the situations in the community are a microcosm of the macrocosm in the world? I would say yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
It's like it's the testing ground.
Yeah, it's right. As he says, it's the testing ground.
Yeah.
I agree with that. That's very true.
But nowadays, the world often seems to be deliberately causing itself disharmony.
That's true.
And so we can work on the opposite effect.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all very much.